In this lesson, we'll edit the ground level paths to include an organic bridge to the Expo building. Now, we're going to be working on this area in this lesson, and just before I do that, I would like to clear up the scene a little bit so that we have a little bit more visual freedom when we revolve and move around our building. So I've created a new layer called source objects, the one that's sitting over here, and we're going to basically place all of the objects that we used to derive our geometries, including the copy of our main form underneath, and we're going to put that onto the source object layer, and we're just going to hide that so we basically start to see our building in its more completed form without any distractions. So I'm now going to start working on this bridge element. So I'm going to extract the few parts that are between that bridge or around that bridge, and I can basically take this editable poly, and just while I'm experimenting with this bridge, I'm going to add another editable poly onto that, and I'm going to remove the mesh smoothing and the shell for now, and I'm going to just work with this edge that we have over here. Now I'm going to start by lifting this up ever so slightly, and I can start to take this edge and then just to drag it out across the entire length of that distance between the shore and the Expo building. So next, what I can do is I can start to look at how it would look if I immediately started to now add the mesh smoothing back. So you can already see what the result will be, and we can basically go and turn the mesh smoothing on and off to have a look at what the results are. So I can add a few segments into that, lift them up, and I can keep going backwards and forwards between that mesh smoothing. So I'd like to create something extremely simple as far as a bridge element. We can look at what type of entrance, if there's any type of column or archway that we have at the beginning here, but I mainly just want to get a very simple element that shows us that there is a link to the actual site itself. Here, I'd like to create something a little bit more of a landing platform, so maybe something that has a bit more verticality and width to it. So I'm going to just choose a selection center, and I'm going to just, holding down Shift, drag out these two sides. So that's going to give me a little bit more of a platform effect, and here I'd like to add a little bit more verticality, and I'm then going to go down and bridge those two elements across. So that's going to give me a little bit of an entrance portal, and once I add that smoothing, you can see what we get. And if you do want to create something that's quite geometric, we could even go and remove this element at the end, and we could go and detach that and create something that looks much more geometric as we go through this man-made portal into this organic world, and then have that obviously large prism element floating above there. So that could actually look quite interesting, I think. Let's just have a look though what the height of it is just while we're building it, because we did do all of that quite randomly. It's 2.75 meters, and that should be quite a nice height. It's quite human scaled. It's definitely not oversized. The width of it is 4.8, so that is actually quite comfortable. Have a little reception desk, perhaps a poster, something that shows you where the entrance to the pavilion is. So what you can do as well is you can start to add a balustrade onto certain sections that need it. So we can either do that by directly working within this editable poly by taking these edges. You can perhaps even loop them and then just deselect what you don't want. Perhaps we only want to keep these parts. So let's just go and move that upwards. And I'm going to move it up ever so slightly. Let's just go and deselect all of these other edges because we only want to work with the bridge itself, and we want to deselect this as well. And I'm first of all going to just stretch it out slightly so that we can get a tiny edge, and then I'm going to move it upwards and then create a more or less 1 meter. If I have a look at the Z value down here, I had a 1 meter height. So I'm going to have a look at the result once that is smoothed, and we can see that we have this neat little balustrade that's been created. So I didn't necessarily create a new object because I am trying to show you a speed modeling technique. So here we can do that quite rapidly just by adding those edges. If I did want to take more time, I could go and select those edges, basically extract out a spline from it the way we had done earlier with our previous object in previous lessons, and I could go and sweep that to create a more complex balustrade. But for now, I think this is indicative of a bridge element. So that is pretty much it for this lesson. I just wanted to show you yet again that you can take existing geometry, edit it with your current modifiers, and basically the process can go really quickly. Once you shell it as well, remember that the entire thing will be shelled, including this. And you can also see that you start getting some quite complex geometries while you do shell it. So for that reason, it may even be a good idea to go and detach what you've created. And let's just go back to the edge selection. We can now create, holding down Control on your keyboard, click on Poly, and you can just go and grow that selection until you have all of that, and you can go and detach that. Once you've detached it, you can then reapply your modifiers, and you can even go back here and you can drag your Mesh Smooth modifier onto this new object. Again, if you like, you can also just keep these top 6 and I can invert and delete the rest. And once I add that mesh smoothing, I can also go and just modify it locally with that mesh smoothing visible in my viewport. So I can go and move those in slightly. And there we have it. I can even go and change the material of this, or I can give it a local shell, which is going to be a much smaller amount, perhaps 0.05, and that's going to give me that element. So as you can see, still everything is being derived from that main source object. So same thing here, we can take a shell and give it a value to give it a structure. So let's say 0.3 for that. So that is it for this lesson. We basically have completed the bridge element, and we can now even start to look at some of the camera views and start to go through what this is going to look like. I think the next thing that would be quite interesting to work on is the actual central tower that we have in the middle. So I think we can now go and give more detail to that. Just before I do work on that central tower, I think it would be also quite interesting to look at how the space frame that we have in the middle, or at least on the top and the bottom, how it can be modified and how we can go and change the form of it. Remember, when we created the space frame, we spoke about how that source mesh can be deformed and how the space frame will adjust to that deformed mesh. Well, I'm going to have a look at that in the next lesson because it's going to bring quite a nice level of complexity into our model, and it's also going to show you a few other techniques when looking at more complex geometries such as that. So hang around for the next lesson as we explore very organically shaped structural steel and how it can all be done in a few easy steps as well. So thanks for watching so far.